Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Spotlight. I am Tim O'Malley, joined by the only person on the Notre Dame beat that you could possibly have for our topic today, stadiums and press boxes. Yes, it is mid-July, and this is the perfect time. Tim Prister, this was your idea. I love it that we could talk about the stadiums and press boxes we have covered. I'm going to jump in real fast because you have a lot more to say on this topic, but I believe in 15 years, this is going in year 16, I have been to 44 stadium press boxes, including Notre Dame. The one I missed was Oklahoma for the birth of my son, Declan. Believe it or not, I don't know if you guys remember, I was not at Oklahoma, Tim. And I've been to 6 or 7 other stadiums as a fan, and we'll get to that later because one of them is the Swamp, and that story must be told. But Tim Prister, your game attendance total is astronomical, and you have a good estimate on press boxes as well, right?
Well, first of all, I thought this would be a great topic because of your memory of everything that happens on the road, especially the cuisine that is served in each press box. So I thought, when I thought of this, I thought, man, that's perfect for O'Malley and myself to talk about. But by my count, I want to say 77 stadiums, and that includes replacement stadiums like in Pittsburgh. We were talking about the various press boxes. I'm sure I'm the only guy around that still goes to games that has been in all 3 of Notre Dame's press boxes, the original one, the one in between, which was a nice one, but they replaced it, of course, when they did the Crossroads project. But I count 78 stadiums, including Notre Dame, and 479 games total. I had a streak of 393 in a row that went by the wayside in pretty dramatic fashion in 2017. But yeah, I mean, I think the LA Coliseum is the most. I've been there 18 times. Stanford, it would be more, except for the pandemic. Stanford, I count 18 times. Some of these may be off a little bit, but
you've been to 3 USC press boxes, right? Because one was outside. And one during renovation or after the earthquake, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh God, that's one of the worst conditions ever. And you wouldn't think that it's in Los Angeles, but at the end of November at night outside, when it's cold and windy, I mean, they had plastic up on the sides, but it certainly didn't keep the cold out. That's one of that may be the worst setting, as far as discomfort is involved. And it happened to be in Los Angeles of all places.
And they have renovated it. They had little pods for 2018 when they were renovating the press box. Now it's a nice press box. Again, I want to quick segue to Stanford because we talk about Stanford and USC obviously every year, the trip out there. Stanford, of course, our favorite aspect of that is pulling in and parking nice and easily, walking around the stadium and relaxing because you can't really tell there's a football game going on when you're walking there. No matter how good Stanford is, it's always a serene environment where, hey, they might be playing a sporting event here today. So that's always wonderful. But there's a unique part about Stanford. I don't know if you remember this. We have watched classic Alabama-Auburn games on Stanford's. So I want to tell people this listening. Most stadiums don't show on their big screen other games being played live. Of course, nobody does during the game, but pre-game, Stanford just puts on TV.
Yeah, because they don't care about college football in general. So, you might as well go ahead and put it on.
Big screen in their, inside their stadium. We have seen the kick 6, Auburn and Alabama, and we saw, it was last year.
2 years ago.
Or 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago when we saw the incredible Auburn-Alabama ending. We got Alabama into the playoff, and we're sitting there looking at it like, I can't believe Auburn let Alabama back into the playoff again with that terrible ending. But it's such a great conversation every time we're at Stanford. It's the only time there's ever cheering in that stadium or the press box is when there's other things going on in the Alabama-Auburn game.
The outside of Stanford Stadium is beautiful. You're right, Tim. I mean, the massive trees, and you just kind of wander around. Weather's always really, really good. Great place. I mean, some of the most beautiful. We have so much to talk about here, but I mean, some of the beautiful views. Well, I think Aviva Stadium in Dublin is the prettiest. But the view at Brigham Young is just, you look into the mountain with the large Y on it. It's an incredible view. Air Force, you can look for miles. First of all, I think that's the highest press box. I think you have an argument with me on what the highest is, the viewpoint.
We're going this year.
But the one at Air Force, you can just see for miles and miles and miles. It's just flat outside of the stadium. And then going to Sanford Stadium in Georgia, to me, that was a bucket list. Cause as when you're a kid, you're growing up, you hear them talk about between the hedges, and then they show shots of between the hedges, and you wonder, man, I wonder what that's like. And that whole atmosphere, pregame atmosphere, I swear they're doing choreographed chants 2 hours before kickoff, and then it carries through the game. That's one of the wildest places I've ever been. When Notre Dame played Miami in the Orange Bowl in 1989, that was the most violent place I've ever been, rivaled by, I'd say, Ohio State in the mid-90s when I was walking down on the field after the game, and I merely have a Notre Dame media guide tucked in my hand. I could be covering the other team with a Notre Dame media guide in my hand, but when the Ohio State fans saw that I had a Notre Dame media guide, I caught a little bit of heat from them.
Much different experience this last time at Ohio State in 2022, right? You felt complete. I mean, I thought that was a welcoming, fun place, and pregame was great there. LeBron was at the game down there. Yeah. We proved as Notre Dame media we could be allowed on the sidelines perhaps at games because nobody ran onto the field in a wild frenzy. That's a little joke for people that realize post-COVID.
Were you at Nebraska? You weren't at Nebraska.
I went to the game in 2001 and sat in the end zone.
That's the most welcoming crowd I think I've ever been in for a Notre Dame game. As
they had no chance of losing, helped a little bit.
No, well, that definitely did. But as the Notre Dame players exited the field, they walked through a tunnel of fans who were actually applauding the Notre Dame players. I've never ever seen anything like that. They are, and I think that's cool because you have respect for the tradition of Notre Dame and other programs. So that one was really memorable, even if the game wasn't quite memorable for Notre Dame.
And you remember that was right before 9/11. Actually, I remember getting off the plane in Omaha, and the sign in the airport said "Game of the Century." Notre Dame, Nebraska. I thought,
oh wow,
a bit strong for the Bob Davies last year, but it was a big deal for #1 Nebraska at the time. Yeah, when you say welcoming fans, you're right. Nebraska, we tailgated for 2 days out there, and they were fantastic in those lots. Least welcoming fans, Miami for me. This is the first game you missed. Miami 1989, of course. I went with my dad, but the game you missed after suffering a heart attack to break your streak. You could always look at it this way, though, Tim. COVID was going to knock out your streak 3 years later anyway. So it would not be an ongoing streak.
Well, that's true, but I may have pulled rank on you and not allowed you to attend games.
BC did not allow reporters or fans, so you're all set right there.
Yeah.
So
I would have rather the streak ended that way.
Yes, it's a much better way to end the streak. I was trying to help you out there. But the Miami game, and this is unique because it was because of Notre Dame being #3 in the country, rolling. Miami was undefeated. I mean, it's probably the loudest place I've been. It was a party at Notre Dame's expense the entire time. I believe it directly affected Notre Dame's ability to play that game, which is rare. You don't normally see that. Another super loud one was the Michigan game when it was under the lights with Notre Dame. I know Brian Kelly and actually both Martin brothers mentioned that was ridiculous. We couldn't hear a single thing. When you get the Martin brothers to admit something like that about an opponent, because you don't think of Michigan that way. And this is not the casual rip at Michigan. Michigan Stadium, of course, is an open bowl, and it just doesn't seem that loud.
No, it doesn't.
Was nuts in that first night game.
And if you've never been to Michigan Stadium, when you're walking on the outside, you're thinking, well, this can't be that big of a stadium.
It's not high. It's not that high.
It's built. It was built down into the ground, so as you're walking on the outside, the stadium doesn't seem that high up. But and you're right, Tim. It's not one of the louder stadiums, and it's just because of the way it's constructed.
I've been to Tennessee only as a fan. That is my favorite stadium and one of the loudest I've ever been to. Notre Dame, of course, beat them in 2004. I was there when they lost to them in 1999. I sat at the top both times, which is a great view. You look over at the river. You look down at specks on the field you think are Notre Dame players. And that was a pretty big upset in 2004 out of nowhere with Tyrone Willingham beating Tennessee in 2004.
Yeah, I didn't expect that to happen that day, but that is the Tennessee River. The beauty, well, inside because of the volume.
It goes straight up. That one goes straight up.
It goes straight up. The orange, there's something about that massive amount of orange. And then, the party on the outside is just so beautiful. That is actually the Tennessee River. At least that's what I have written down here. And it's, the last time I was there, I don't remember, I get them mixed up now, but it was a sunny, beautiful day and just a really, really great setting. Now, what about I mean, I've been to Boston College 9 times.
Now I know what you're saying for the worst state.
Yeah, I mean, it just I would say that that's the most drunken student body that I've probably encountered. Maybe with Ohio State when that was a tough environment too.
Yeah.
But there really isn't anything real distinctive about Boston College other than the student body really gets into it when Notre Dame comes to town.
Yeah, BJ Raji got into that one too. If you recall, using a Notre Dame lineman who I will not name right now as a projectile device in that 17-0 game. That's a famous scene, of course. We do have one write-in from a guy named Rocco Cimarano, who I happen to room with. Easy to be welcoming. He's talking about Nebraska when Notre Dame had no chance to win. We sat next to the only lousy Nebraska fan in the stadium. Yeah. I did forget about that. We had the one persistently belligerent Nebraska fan in the state sitting next to us at that
game. They have a reputation that regardless who, well, I maybe Oklahoma might have been a little bit different, but they do have the reputation of being very welcoming. Another beautiful stadium. Were you at Washington?
No.
Didn't get a real warm welcome from seeing Tyrone Willingham back in that stadium, but that is beautiful because people, and my brother who actually lives in Eugene, Oregon, flew in for the Washington game, and there's Lake Washington out there, and people come up in boat. They come to the game and they arrive in boats and get off, at the shoreline, and off in the distance, it's the Cascade Mountains. It's Mount Rainier, which is spectacular. Really, really awesome place. However, I remember being in the Washington press box, old rickety thing. I'm sure it's been replaced. It has been replaced. And I look down at the floor, and I can see there are holes in the floor. I can see the fans below my feet. That's how rickety that press box was.
Great question here. I went as a fan in 2000. I started covering Notre Dame in 2009. You mentioned Washington. That was 2008. So I missed that. Did a little blog work for Old Blue and Gold back in 2008, by the way. But I got married that year. I wasn't full-time. Evan Martin asks, how does Penn State Stadium compare? Last temporary call between the two schools was the best game-winning catch at ND Stadium. Well, the one in 2007 was Jimmy Clausen's first start. Right? That was because he didn't start against Michigan.
Right.
Jimmy Clausen's first start. I was in the stadium. I had great seats with a other former roommate and his dad, Penn State alum, got us fantastic seats. But we were the two Notre Dame fans at the Penn State section of an absolute beating.
Yeah, that was the Whiteout. That was a really, really intimidating place. One of the, just as cold and windswept because it's built, the stadium's just like out in the middle of an expansive field. And it was cold, and the Whiteout is intimidating. Well, and that wasn't cold then.
You've been in 91 where it was miserable.
Right. Previous trips there, but the Whiteout in 2007, Notre Dame, they were ill prepared for that opportunity. And the final score indicated that.
I believe this is a segue, but 1991 loss to Penn State came 1 week after the Tennessee beat Notre Dame.
Yes.
The miracle in South Bend. And,
right.
And Lou Holtz, in one of his memoirs, says that's the only time he left the house. He told his wife, Beth, we have no chance of winning today.
Yeah.
And that's a rough one. And it looked like it on the field too. But it could happen to anybody when when your season comes to a quote unquote end because of the loss at home that knocks you out of the national title hunt. It's hard to get up for Penn State, who was a very good team as well.
That, and we, the atmosphere in Georgia obviously is really, really
probably
difficult.
The best we've been to together.
I would say just the coordination of the fans.
Yeah.
Like almost like working in unison with one another. And it starts well before the game. We got in there really, really early before the game, and I'm glad that we did because we were able to go down on the field pregame. Yeah. I was able to touch the hedges that I always wanted to touch when I was a kid and walk alongside them, if not between them. That was fantastic. And I know you were a big fan of the parking situation at Georgia.
Yes. So we were warned by everyone in the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia that on our drive to the game in Athens, because we stayed in Atlanta, on our drive there, we would need to plan an extra couple hours because of like the one road in and one way out and how bad it was going to be. We left Atlanta, we drove, we parked, we didn't pause. We asked a nice lady where the stadium was because we couldn't see it. And she said, it's right
there.
So that is one of the best parking situations. I don't know how it worked out because it was the biggest game in a very long time for Georgia.
Longest walk from
Oh,
From
yeah.
parking lot to stadium, Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech was awful. We could barely find it. I mean, you needed a bus. They were running buses. I don't know. The walk back was really tough. That was 2018, our first time. Or that was to the 2021 game. In 2018, I actually stayed with friends, the people that are writing in here. I actually stayed in Blacksburg at a house, and I walked to that Virginia Tech game in 2018. It's a weird pleasure of mine. There's not many times you get to walk to a game like where you're staying. You get to walk into the game. The Alamo Dome, of course, is one when you stay right down there and you on the river walk to that game. I actually walked to Georgia Tech during COVID. I probably would not have been able to do that if it wasn't during COVID, but I stayed right downtown or right down in Midtown Atlanta. Walked to Georgia Tech. Pretty big mistake. Well, Gator Bowl. We all walked to the Gator Bowl. It was right there.
Mhm.
Pretty big mistake I made the first time I went to the Citrus Bowl, 2011. It was the Champ Sports Bowl then against Florida State. I walked to the game in the daytime.
Not a great neighborhood.
Not the best time to walk back in the evening. So, yeah, BYU was a little nicer walk than that. And I made the mistake of walking to the hottest place on earth, Texas Stadium, Harold Royal Stadium in Austin, and that was bad for pregame sweat.
But Austin, game day, college town, absolutely fantastic. I wrote something that I had never written before and doubt that I'll ever write it again. But after we saw the defensive game plan that Brian Van Gorder had against Texas with its 245-pound quarterback and 240-pound running back with a 3.35 or 3.35.
Yeah.
I wrote that he should be fired, and damned if he wasn't a couple weeks later.
I read that at like 2 a.m. when I was finishing up my notebook to send in because that was a long game. Remember overtime? That was a long game.
Yeah.
I wrote that like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's not something you see a lot
of. It just made so little sense that it was absolutely ridiculous.
You're gonna like this one. I moved to South Bend a week before this game from Atlanta. Paul Gerard writes, I was walking down to my seat and I saw Armando Allen under center at the Big House, and it just got worse from there. I do remember turning on that television. Thankfully, that is a Big House game I skipped. I don't know if many people listening now know that I have been to the Big House 7 times. Notre Dame is 0-7 in those 7 games, so people are trying to keep me away. I did not go to that one, but when you saw Armando Allen under center early in the first drive, you figured there might be a problem too, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, yeah. I've been to some tough games at that stadium as well, like the storm that we walked in from. Was that 2019?
Yeah, it was 2019, and I can't really explain it properly to people. We picked Notre Dame to win in 2019. Close. We both picked them close. Michigan was not playing. Michigan had 2 losses. They were struggling. We both picked Notre Dame to win. Not, obviously a close. I walk in the press box and you have this look on your face like the game ended. I was like, what happened since I got out of my car? And you're like, oh, I don't like this. There's
like we were waiting for the elevator. It wasn't like up in the press box. It was like, right. We just walked through the door and stand by the elevator. And I'm like, they are not going to win this game.
Yeah, but you were right. It was as right as you could be. There was a little bit of that at Louisville. Remember, I was down on the field with a bunch of writers. We were talking to Chip Long, who was he was on the staff, one of the analysts for Louisville. We were talking before the game, and I looked at all Notre. You were up in the press box for this one, and it was me and a bunch of writers from other sites. And we're all looking around like, God, Notre Dame does not look like they're ready to play this game at all. We couldn't figure it out. And I walked up, and I remember Brian Driscoll. I walk up, and he goes, did you think something was off down there? I go, yeah. Like, I don't know what's happening here. And Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily was saying the same thing. We told you, and you're like, well, what's going on? I'm like, it's just like Michigan. There's something going on down there, and it's not good for Notre Dame.
And then you talked to Chip Long, who is never afraid to express an opinion about what he thinks of the situation and the people involved in it.
He did say, I think I can say it now. He did say before the game about Notre Dame's receivers, you can time them on a sundial. So I thought, wow, I guess Quincy Riley feels like he might have the upper hand on this one. So yeah, that was a tough one. Louisville was a good, really good atmosphere. And that was a sneaky atmosphere because you did not expect that from Louisville like we did at Georgia and Ohio State. So you mentioned the worst views, and I have to bring this up because I thought I may never go back there. Michigan State is the worst view in the world. I was looking up 2012, great Notre Dame victory. It actually kind of launched them forward. That was the big win before they played. Michigan was not great that year. That was a good win, but they were underdogs at Michigan State. I couldn't tell if it was Theo Riddick or John Goodman on the field is how high we were in that press box. And they give you a ticket for $1.50 hot dog as your press box meal.
Thank you very
out
much.
of East Lansing. Also, walking back to my parking garage, they moved the temporary parking garage sign, so every parking garage looks the same to me all of a sudden in East Lansing. I am out on all East Lansing games, but I will have to go because it's my job.
How about stadiums where a game should not have been played?
Well,
San Diego County Credit Union Stadium when Notre Dame played Navy.
Do you remember what Tom Noy and I said to you about that when we were sitting outside covering that game? You were talking about how bad the stadium was, and it's all true. And I said, you can send me back here every week to cover whatever sporting event you want at this outdoor facility. But if you're talking about the actual stadium and everything else, I agree with you. But I will cover anything you want me to cover in San Diego.
Well, that's true. I would not turn down another trip to San Diego. Now, the fans would disagree because it took them so long to get into the game that they missed the first quarter.
So that parking situation looked awful. I had no parking pass. I don't know how this worked. I pulled up to the gate and I said media and showed him my laptop, and he let me go in. Everybody. So try that at home. If you guys can bring a laptop to games, people just let you park right next to the stadium like I did.
I'm looking at my notes when I did I mention this that I during the pandemic when we were scrambling to write about stories. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to go over all the stadiums that I went to, and I wrote down having been at Kyle Field at Texas A&M, which we're going to be going back there fairly shortly. And I wrote, you look down and you think you're watching an old newsreel clip from the 1940s when you're watching the Aggies cheer squad of males and females. It's such a throwback look, and we will definitely see that again. I see we have a question, Tim, about the hurricane at Carter Finley Stadium at NC State in Raleigh.
Yeah, that was nuts because you could see. Now we've been to NC State twice, and they were both delayed. One was a lot worse. Was the hurricane? They probably shouldn't have played. And they also, by the way, they towed media cars during the hurricane. Not mine, but I remember JJ Stankovitz and Lakin Littman had their cars towed while we were inside that stadium.
Why? Where?
I think they were probably parked somewhere somewhat illegally because it was such a bad storm. They parked. I mean, they were near media parking, but they parked and just ran in. Yeah. But they had their cars towed during that too. That's bad. You could see actually the stadium was shaking. The lights
were definitely shaking. Yeah,
it was pretty bad. And I remember Sampson left the press box. We went down to the post game presser, and he opened his umbrella, and it just completely folded and flew off into the air. Like they were like, I don't think umbrella is going to help you from the rain here, Pete. But yeah, that was probably should not have been played. We were not staying in the same hotel. I went back to my hotel. We had no power. They gave us light sticks, glow sticks. You smack them to walk around and find your room. And it was open bar. They opened the bar.
It was. Yes, it definitely was. When I just looked down and saw the Carrier Dome, and I was talking about the two coldest places I've ever been. Penn State in November.
Yeah.
And Syracuse and that was December. It was like December 6th when they played.
Oh, walking in. Yeah. My first trip to the Carrier Dome was a couple years ago, 2022 for football. For basketball.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a nice. I didn't think about that. That's kind of we call it open air press box. It's not open air because it's inside. But I love the press boxes, and this is a segue where you can feel the fans.
Oh man, Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson's the best. You are inside the fans, basically. You are right there inside the fans. Notre Dame and Michigan, and Alan Wazalewski is great at this. Shout out for Notre Dame. If you don't open the windows at Notre Dame, you don't know a football game is going on inside that press box. I don't know if that's a compliment to the structural engineers of the press box. It probably is. But he opens the windows, and when it's obviously you don't want to do that in November. But for Clemson, he opened it in November because you have to feel the stadium shaking when it's a big game. And Michigan and Notre Dame open their windows. They're the same design, those long windows up top.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. If it's shut, it's tight, man. And you don't have a really good feel for it. And at Clemson, like we could literally reach out and tap the students on the shoulder. And
Georgia had that. Georgia opened up the windows for us.
Yeah.
Too. Wonderful.
In both the times that we were at Clemson, we had those seats, and that's really cool. Now, the first time when what hurricane was that?
2015, the hurricane was coming through.
But it was warm and it rained, and it was like we could reach forward and probably feel the rain, but
it didn't affect us
back in our seat, it did not affect us at all. So it was, it was an open press box. It was raining, but it was warm. you completely felt like a part of a part of the crowd. And it was, that was really cool. I'm still looking, I've been to the Rose Bowl twice. I've been to the actual stadium itself, but it was a regular season game against UCLA, and then a Rose Bowl during the pandemic year that was moved and was not in Pasadena. So I'm looking forward to, and I'm running out of time, Tim. I'm running out of time here, man. I'm looking to actually being at a Rose Bowl game in Pasadena.
I have never been to the Rose Bowl. I never would have been to the Rose Bowl, even if there was the pandemic and COVID knocked it out, but I did not go to that Alabama Devontae Smith showcase. Yes, because we're only allowed one for that. That was the rules during COVID. But I've never been to the Rose Bowl, and I've never been to Outson Stadium. I want to go to an Oregon game. I probably won't be able to go covering it, but I'd love to go there as a fan because I bet that would be a great nighttime.
My brothers lived there for 50 years, and I've never been to a game there. When Notre Dame played there in the early 80s and tied them, I was with Blue and Gold. I was not going to every game yet. My streak of 393 started with Lou Holtz's first game in 86 and ended about
that's one of my favorite games ever.
Right. I had covered games prior to that, but I didn't have a streak yet. That's what has me up to 479, I think. And then of course it ended before the Wake Forest game started in 2017. So the previous week against NC State.
Yes. Yeah.
That would have been what ended my streak.
Tom Zwiller was a good question because he was with us. As far as the bowl games go, where does the Sun Bowl rank as a venue? I know Priester has this extremely high because you talked to me about it quite a bit when we were at the. It was a beautiful venue. It is a beautiful venue.
You mean having gone there the first time before you got there?
Yeah, I went in 2010. It was less beautiful.
Oh, you did? Okay.
That game as well, but it was.
Oh, it was. Of course you were there. It snowed.
But this last one was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, that's an absolutely gorgeous venue. I'd put it up there with in different ways than Aviva Stadium and Brigham Young, but that is when it's, and if you look back at their, you go through their guide and they have each game listed and what the weather was like. Most of those games in December are sunny, so there's a legitimate reason why they call it the Sun Bowl, because in El Paso in December, late December, you'll get a lot of sunny days, and we had one this past year.
I think of that kind of like Tempe. When you go to Arizona State games in Tempe, we were last there in 2014. Of course, you covered the 88 championship. I was there in the top row. I love that stadium.
I love that stadium too. That's a really pretty setting as well. It's aged quite a bit.
Yeah. And we haven't been there in 10 years. I'm sure if they haven't renovated, it's good.
Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park to go to baseball games there is really, really cool. When you go to Yankee Stadium and they put you in the front row of the media, I always go to the back row because they have heaters back there, because we always go in December. That's true. Yeah, that is completely open air. And as I always say, my blood runs cold. So I'm the first guy to get cold in the press box, but I go for the back row in Yankee Stadium when Notre Dame goes there.
Hard for me to say this as a Red Sox fan that detests the Yankees, for people listening on the chat, but Yankee Stadium does a better job with the football setup than Fenway did. Yankee Stadium does a pretty good job with their setup.
Yeah, I think maybe the configuration's a little bit more difficult, but
also,
I do love
through Yankees. You get to go through the Yankee Stadium dugout to go to the field, which is
right.
the coolest thing.
Right, and I think outside Fenway Park is really, really, really cool. I mean that you feel like you're at an old time baseball game when you're walking outside of Fenway Park. Who else do you have, Tim? Before we get to the cuisine.
Yeah, this is a good question because actually it's from KA. What are your thoughts on Ross-Ade Stadium at Purdue? He or she has some brutal memories of 97 and 99. 97, of course, was the shocking win by Joe Tiller, and 99 was when Notre Dame basically ran out of time 2 weeks in a row after running out of time at Michigan. That's a Drew Brees game.
You like Ross-Ade Stadium?
I like Ross-Ade Stadium. I've only been inside. I went back in the 90s to watch, but in the 80s too. But I've only been inside since it's been renovated. So I was there in 09, 11, and 13. They haven't played since. I think that is the modern blueprint for stadiums I've been to since, including Notre Dame. You have great seats. You have big cubbies behind you because you bring laptops and stuff to the game. And then you have the food area in the back. And I think Notre Dame and Michigan have actually followed that. I thought that was originally the nicest stadium I had been to when I'd only been to like 10 press boxes. I thought that was the best.
How about Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee? We all, after our hotel experience in Tallahassee the last time, none of us are excited to go back to Tallahassee. The stadium is
it's a fun place to watch.
8 billion bricks. I mean, there are more bricks in that stadium than you ever see. But my memory of that is that when Notre Dame went down there with Tyrone Willingham in 2002 and won a game, and it was humid, it was hot. And
I was in the stands for that one.
Yeah, they had a horrible little dark, dingy little tent of an interview room that was so hot. So it actually kind of spilled out on the field doing interviews with players. That was the last time Notre Dame played well under Tyrone Willingham.
That's true.
I mean, that was an absolute demarcation. I don't know that there's any. I mean, it's just coincidence, but that was a demarcation between, man, Tyrone Willingham's doing a great job to this thing is all falling apart.
Florida State, so Doak Campbell Stadium, underrated loudness for Notre Dame. In 2014, when they were number 2 with Jameis Winston, undefeated still, and Notre Dame came down there undefeated, played a great game and lost, of course, at the end with the famous penalty flag on C.J. Procise. When Will Fuller, this is why I knew Will Fuller was different, because he was a sophomore. We were on the field, under 5 minutes to go, super loud. It was they of course, you're about to lose a 23-game win streak if you're Florida State there. So it was crazy loud. And Will Fuller is a sophomore with Ronald Darby one-on-one against him on second and long, just raises his hand for more crowd noise and catches the pass to convert on second down. I was like, man, that guy, that's a different player right there. But I thought Florida State very loud in 2021 too, when they almost upset Notre Dame in the opener. Yeah.
And, when Corey Robinson scored that touchdown, there was a picture out there, and Sampson gave me a lot of heat for this, where I was down on the sideline near the end zone, and there was a picture of me when he scored. I just signaled touchdown. I didn't react.
You can
watch
the game. You'll see us. We're standing right next to it. We're on the TV right there.
And I just calmly raised my hand, signaling a touchdoon, which is unprofessional.
He said it was his ringtone for your picture.
But it was. But I had to put my arms down there pretty quickly, because it was a pick. I think the call was probably accurate, but a pretty rotten time to be making a call like that.
Yeah, I give Brian Kelly some credit actually for how he handled that post-game press.
How about we haven't even mentioned AT&T Stadium in Arlington.
Perfect segue, because not only is there's 5 things about it you have to know. It's got the best food in the world. We'll get into that in a second. Tim Prister and I are unable to navigate it post-game without getting completely lost.
Oh, I got to get lost every time. I'm locked in. I can't get out.
Yeah. The first time I was there, my favorite part of it is when you take the elevator and you press the elevator buttons, they're all stars, like for the Dallas Cowboys. And it always reminds me of Jurassic Park, Spared No Expense. I think of Jerry Jones being the Richard Attenborough character, said spared no expense in his Jerry World. I love the stars thing. But the food there is out of this world. And NFL stadiums do have better food, I think, because they bring in
NFL stadium press boxes are better. They're bigger. They're bigger and better.
Except for Soldier Field.
Well, newer stadiums, although that's been renovated. But
so I remember it was the 13 game, I think. The 18 game I was the first person to ever have COVID in 2018 during the Final Four, if you recall. I was the test case monkey for COVID that day, sitting next to you at the Final Four game. But in 13, I went and I had tacos at the taco bar pregame. I was like, that was really good. And somebody came over and was like, man, did you have that meal? I was like, yeah, those are good tacos. He's like, no. The other meal on the other side of the curtain. I was like, what? You go over there. They are carving fresh fajita steaks. As Sampson said, there's a grandmother in the back making fresh chocolate chip cookies for everybody. That was the best food.
And the aroma is wafting through
I thought the taco bar, I didn't know the taco bar was like the little appetizer to walk to the real meal. So that was, they're the best. Heinz Field, noon games, they do prime rib cuts.
Love it. Love the setting at Heinz Field. It's fantastic. The baseball stadium's there. Yeah. I love Pittsburgh. I've always loved Pittsburgh. Fantastic town to go to.
Texas had a great Mexican. Of course, downstairs, you had to go down to the bowels of Darrell K. Royal Stadium, but they had fantastic food. And Notre Dame has hot dogs.
In the past and in the future.
They do. Do you remember in 2017 when Notre Dame kind of opened that press box for real? Because 16 we were sitting there and it was makeshift. It wasn't, which was perfect for the 2016 season. That it was a makeshift.
It was a makeshift season.
Yeah, it's a makeshift season as well. But in 17, they actually just tried to cater the meals to the opponent coming in. So like when Georgia came in, there was barbecue and all that. They stopped doing that ever since. And what do I do at Notre Dame games?
You bring your own food.
I bring my own lunch. That's right. I have Lori Priester or Jess Bryce's hot peppers on a turkey sandwich, and that's how I try to make it through the games.
You got any other cuisine you want to talk about? I'm definitely not a connoisseur.
Southern games are the best. We go to ACC games, and they have the best food.
Yeah,
it's the best way it goes. People will like this one. I mentioned Arizona State. I can only count about 5 places post game where they bring the beer cart. Arizona State, they bring the beer cart. Stanford, but we knew Alan George, who was the media relations director, and I think he might have just brought us beer for a post game at Stanford. UNI and Louisville, basketball. And it's a good thing you didn't have a second one because you had to drive me out of there in a scene from The Stand with the storm of the century that almost trapped us in the state of Kentucky. I don't know if we've told the story before, but we walked into the game and there was like a light dusting of snow. We walked out of the game and there's street signs down, cars overturned. It was the worst scene I have seen, but they also serve beer there, but it's a good thing we didn't have a lot.
That was more of that was an older practice. If you had been around in the 80s,
more beer.
That happened more often. I always tell the story that, we talk about my streak ending. A lot of it had to do with the fact that I was a prodigious cigar smoker. And in the Orange Bowl, in the Orange Bowls in the late 80s, I smoked cigars in the Orange Bowl. Now I remember, I think it was 89 when I lit one up and somebody said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing? I'm smoking a cigar." "Oh, well, you can't smoke cigar in here." Well, I used to be able to. Had they put that ban in earlier, I might have had a healthier and longer streak. But that it was, you've seen the old clips from the Notre Dame days of the sports writers with their hats on and their cigars smoking in the press box. It actually was that way at one point.
I think the Gator Bowl, not the Gator Bowl, but we went to cover Navy in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And there's 2 memories of that. I believe they served us beer. They still had payphones, which was my favorite thing. I took a picture of the payphones in the 2016 press box. We went back 2 years ago for the bowl game, and the payphones were just painted over. There was giant things jutting out of the wall. They just painted over the payphones. There's no longer phones there. I thought you couldn't just take out the whole structure. But while we walked out of that game, it was an 11:30 kickoff, and it was Navy, and they beat Notre Dame. It was with the Will Worth game where they couldn't tackle Will Worth. So the game ended at 2, and we were done writing by 3:30. This is pre-spotlight or overtime days. We were ready to go back to the hotel. And Samson says to us when we were walking out, "Welcome to your bowl game."
That was it.
That was our last nice weather game we went out to USC, but it wasn't the same. But question here from Kenneth James. This is for you, Tim. I get nostalgic when I see and hear the BGI print going from the 80s and 90s. I'd write a letter to the editor every week. So you and Kenneth James probably had some fights, Tim.
I remember the name.
You do remember the name. All right.
I do.
Was he a good letter to the editor? Or
I don't remember that. I'm going to have to go on his word here.
Bodie Wells asks, just jumping in, sorry if you've already discussed this, where would you rank ND Stadium at its peak? We have not discussed it. This is a great question. He suggests Michigan 18, Clemson 22, OSU 23, compared to, say, those major road games we did talk about, OSU, Georgia, and Florida State. At its peak, Notre Dame for us is certainly Miami 88, Florida State 93, and USC 05.
Yeah.
But I think he has the right game since. Those were Michigan 18 was loud for Notre Dame, like super loud.
It was, and Clemson 22. I would put there as well.
That's a shout out to Alan for opening the windows because it was cold and people were complaining. I'm like, let them complain, man. We need to hear what's going on down there. It's OSU 23 was loud.
It was. I guess I noticed some more on the road because it's just a different environment, and I've been in Notre Dame Stadium, literally hundreds of times. So, but 22 Clemson, I think was really, really awesome. Yeah.
I mean, for a night game,
and the ones that you mentioned, goes without saying. The 77 green jersey game was crazy, and I have my own story that I've told about that before. I was
Speaking of beer outside of press box.
Yeah, I was a senior in high school, and I was at that green jersey game, and boy, was I hungover from the Steve Miller concert the night before.
And I'm sure people a little older than me that went to Notre Dame will bring up Michigan '88 because they actually got a penalty for crowd noise. I would like to see that happen again at Notre Dame Stadium, and I don't think it will.
We're going to be.
I don't think there is a penalty, but they had to issue a penalty because the crowd wouldn't quiet down for Michael Taylor, the quarterback, to do his signals. That was a rule back then.
Yeah, it was funny how they used to, like, they'd give you a warning, and then they'd stop the game and give you a warning. Okay, your crowd's going to. And that which of course brought into play signaling plays in from the sideline.
Now, this would be much tougher for you. We'll wrap up here soon. This past season, all 7 stadiums I went to, so this will be the case for you as well, we had been to before. It was different than 2022, where obviously when we went to Las Vegas, that was a new stadium. Yeah. I had never been to Syracuse. You had. And also Ohio State. I had never been to Ohio State, and you had been at one time. Is there a stadium coming up that you have not been to? On a schedule coming up?
Oh, I haven't really checked.
Because that's.
I mean, I'm sure there's some newer facilities that are in play, and
Arkansas would be one, right?
Oh, I've never been to Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas is coming up in the next 2 years. Yeah, the next. Oh, it's next year. They play Arkansas next year.
Is it next year? Really?
Yeah, because it was supposed to be home during COVID. Because I ended up on every Arkansas show in the country for 3 months, promising them, and they weren't going to get to come to Notre Dame because there was no way their SEC was going to come to Notre Dame that year in COVID, but they did not want to believe it. I think the season ended, and they were still calling. I wonder if they could squeeze in a game with Notre Dame. So,
Arkansas
comes here, they are going to invade South Bend.
No doubt. This has been fun. It's longer than normal, but we're gonna as soon as we wrap up here, Tim, we're gonna say, oh man, what about that stadium? But I think we hit a pretty good cross section. I told a few stories here along the way that encapsulates our career in covering Notre Dame football on the road.
Yeah, for me, games I need to get to. I want to go to Washington because I missed those. Autzen Stadium, and number 1, the Rose Bowl, because the only way I get to go to the Rose Bowl now will be covering a playoff game. So that would be the most important one for me. For Tim Prister, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for indulging us on this issue of Irish Illustrated Spotlight.